Alright guys, I'm back and the economic apocalypse is drawing nearer, and this is your Armageddon update. As Trump gets closer to the Oval Office, a big trade war is coming for the world. It's important we understand how much control Trump has in the White House come 2025. As we predicted, Trump has now the entire trifecta. The presidency, the Senate, and the House. They are all Republican now, which means huge control over budget, taxes, and most importantly, trade tariffs. Unified control means the odds of Trump getting the cabinet he wants are extremely high. It's critical we look at his cabinet picks because every one of them, in some form or another, is a China hawk. It's not just about loyalty. The agenda still revolves around containing China, but it will be amped up to 11. Now, his choice of Secretary of State is Marco Rubio. It's the same person who was concerned about the US losing the power of the dollar. I think we can all remember that the US can't sanction countries if they de-dollarize. Now, Rubio is going to take Blinken's approach to Beijing to the next level. It won't just be threats. Rubio has a long list of grievances and justification to corner China's economy.
Why do Chinese companies get to do whatever they want in our economy, but our companies do not? So all Donald Trump is saying is we're going to get along, but we're going to get along in an even playing field, not one in which China continues to be allowed to cheat and steal. Yeah. And get away with things that are bad for America.
There's two things. The first is the Chinese have found a way to use capitalism against us. And what I mean by that is the ability to attract investment into entities that are deeply linked to the state. That military-commercial fusion that exists in China is a concept that we don't have in this country. We have contractors that do defense work, but there is no distinction in China between advancements in technology, biomedicine, whatever it might be, and the interests of the state.
So you can see the reasons to contain China piling up to the sky. It's also quite bizarre considering US defense contractors, they have their own lobbyists to push for influence. And let's not forget Marco Rubio is currently sanctioned by China. So this is quite a confrontational move. If Beijing lifts the sanctions, it could be interpreted as a weakness. But if they don't, well, dialogue with the US could break down even further. And this is a horrible quandary that could drag the US and China into further conflict. Now in 2023, Rubio made a statement in a speech that summed up this entire sentiment on Beijing, that frames China as an enemy and how the US must decouple from them. They have leverage over our economy, they have influence over our society, they have an army of unpaid lobbyists here in Washington. Now other picks like Waltz to replace Sullivan are also hawkish against China. The new Secretary of Defense is another good example of this. It's important to quantify what China has to lose in the event of a trade war. Now the US might slap the world with 10% tariffs, but a 60% tax is coming for Beijing. And that's going to grind two-way trade, especially Chinese exports to the US, to a halt. Despite Biden's trade curbs and a G7 moving against China, business is actually booming. By the end of the year, China's trade surplus will reach nearly $1 trillion, and that's 12% above the previous record set in 2022. It's impressive and it shows how dependent the world is on Chinese goods. Countries are buying because they have to control prices and inflation in their own economies, and buying Chinese products means importing deflation. Digging deeper into the trade surplus, we can see how much damage a US decoupling will hit China. The US accounts for the majority of China's trade surplus, and this year alone, it would easily surpass $300 billion once again. That's a huge amount of money that will have to be replaced. Now, some of the missing trade will be filled by countries like Mexico. They'll buy Chinese products, they'll slap a new label on it, and they'll re-export them to the US for sure. But China's overall trade is gonna fall. And that's why China has fired their stimulus. It's why they are preparing another big economic bazooka shot in 2025. They have to ramp up domestic demand to replace this shortfall, and it won't be easy. It's gonna take some time. Now, in his speech, President Xi warned the US against unwinding global trade, that the US is trying to go back in history with their tariffs, and obviously China benefits from globalization. They are manufacturing giants, so free trade helps China push out their goods to the world. But here's a big reason why the US wants to contain China. More than half of this trade is conducted in the Chinese RMB, so globalization is helping to de-dollarize the world as well. Beijing isn't going to just sit around and do nothing. Yes, their economy is not out of the woods yet, and issuing stimulus is a sign of emergency, but more levers can be pulled. A former PBOC official just confirmed it. If Trump starts a trade war, China would likely retaliate, and this will impact the Chinese currency as well as their demand for US treasuries. Now, this should be ultra obvious. By not buying US bonds, China is going to make it harder for Trump to reshore production back to the US. Funding costs for the US will continue to stay high and push up the national debt even more. Just because Biden gets replaced doesn't mean all the previous plans are going to get completely rolled back. The semiconductor war is still going to continue. In fact, Trump wants everything to be built in America. China's other strategy is to devalue the Chinese yuan, and this is going to be a double-edged sword for sure. It will make Chinese imports more expensive, but it could crush US exports to the world. Now, when Trump tariffed China back in 2018, Beijing took action. They devalued the Chinese currency. It went from 620 per dollar to nearly 720 yuan per dollar, and that's over 15% devaluation. Only when Trump lost in 2020 did China allow their currency to strengthen back to the low $6 range. It happened then, and it's going to happen again. It's a classic Chinese strategy to hurt US exports. By devaluing their currency, China can make their products to foreign buyers even cheaper, and that hurts US exports to the world, especially in critical markets like EVs and solar panels. And if we just compare production costs between the US and China, everything in America is through the roof. And this is the Achilles heel of US industries. Now, will this raise the prices in China? Yes, it would, but they can still afford it because prices are already so low. If we go out there and we look at mainstream media, every headline is about China trapped in deflation. So the effect on the US economy could be much worse. So Trump's trade war with Beijing will have consequences. Not only will domestic inflation rise, don't expect US exports to suddenly explode. It might even drop as a result of China's currency war. As this mess continues to evolve, we have to talk about what Olaf Scholz is doing because it's a clear sign of panic. The German economy is going down the tubes and the snap election is coming in just a couple of months in February. So Scholz is in a big scramble to find a win somewhere. The German economy is on track to crash again this year. GDP fell by 0.3% in 2023 and is about to fall again by 0.1% this year. Even next year, growth will come in at only 0.4%, and that's compared to our already low base. The Volkswagen layoffs and the shutdowns, guys, those are just the start. More industries will be in trouble, and Germany's energy crisis is about to get a whole lot worse. Their biggest import partner, the United States, is going to become a tariff nation. It's not just China getting punished, but other G7 allies, including Germany. German automakers are going to get clobbered once again. It's not just from their Chinese competitors. The US market accounts for 13% of Germany's passenger car exports. Over 3 million vehicles are sold to the US consumer. That's over 36 billion euros. From your BMs to Mercedes, people in the US apparently really love their German cars. But Trump wants to bring US manufacturing back, especially in the auto industry. And he has said it many times on the campaign trail. You either build cars in the US, or you be prepared to be slapped with a huge tariff.
But they do a lot of car manufacturing, and they're going to be a big beneficiary of what we're doing. We're going to make cars the way we had it 40 or 50 years ago. We were dominant. We're going to be dominant again. They all want our market, but they don't want to make them here. They're going to all make them here.
And that's why Germany is in panic mode. An additional 10% tariff is enough to turn German exports uncompetitive. Japanese cars will start taking over market share. There'll be more Nissans and there'll be more Toyotas driving around. Even a Ford or Chevy will cost less than a German car. Volkswagen will get screwed once again. And to reverse this, Germany needs cheap Russian gas once again to revive gas flows to Nord Stream 2, but there has to be peace in Europe first. This is where things get really bizarre. Scholz gave Putin a call and told him to withdraw his troops now, that Russia has to negotiate with Ukraine to end the war and simply give up the campaign. Now this of course is fantastical. It's a last-ditch attempt to carve out a deal before getting sidelined by the Americans. It's a Hail Mary to score a win before the elections, to set up the stage to restore cheap energy from Russia before it's truly too late. Their industries depend heavily on keeping the input costs down. Now, Trump has selected Chris Wright as the new head of energy, and as an oil fracking boss, Trump has telegraphed a punch, something that we have said in a previous video before. The US is moving to unleash more American energy. More oil and gas will flood the US and bring down manufacturing costs, at least on the energy side. This will force more and more industrial companies to leave Germany and head to the US. It's a move by Trump to industrialize the US at the expense of Europe. Volkswagen, for example, has a plant in Tennessee. They have assembled over 170,000 cars last year. More than $4 billion alone have been invested in this one site. German automakers make stuff in the US mainly for the domestic American market. Almost half of US production is for US consumers around the country. And once you understand this, you realize that Germany is screwed. They are losing Asian markets to China, and to sell to the US, you have to start manufacturing there real soon. And that, of course, will lead to further deindustrialization in Germany. Now, Scholz calling Putin is more than just trying to end the war. He needs to restore relations and get cheap gas back before it's too late. And if the Americans make a deal with Russia first, the EU will be on the back foot. Now, the story gets worse for Scholz. Russia doesn't need the EU to survive, it's Europe that needs Russian energy to stay competitive. Russia has announced they are going to build yet another gas pipeline to China. It will cut through Kazakhstan and deliver up to 35 billion cubic meters of gas a year. And this has big implications for the German economy. China is going to double their imports of Russian gas at cheaper prices. Beijing now has even more negotiating power. The EU will be forced to buy expensive LNG from the US. Paying much more for energy will only decimate their industries further. So Germany is desperate, there's no other way to put it. They are caught in the crossfire between the US and China's economic war. Now, Russia won't just withdraw, that part should be obvious to everyone. And it's very likely that the US will work out a deal with the Russians. The EU once again will be left out in the cold. But as always, let me know what you think. Does China have a plan for Trump's trade war? And is there still hope for the Germans? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe, be sure to smash the like button and subscribe as we navigate through these crazy times.